Honeycutt?
I don't know where he's at.
Okay, we are recording. Give me a second for Zoom to live stream to start up. Oh, there he is. There comes Jeff.
Jumping on. All right. Hey, Jeff. So we are going to get started. I think we're live, right?
Yep, we are live.
Okay. Not doing this before. I think we have to call to order.
Yeah.
I believe. Okay. So we'll make a motion to call order to start this meeting for, I guess, October, but for September financials. All good? Okay. Take roll call. Nate Fries.
Jeff Honeycutt.
Ken and Bonnie need to take roll too as well, or we just... Okay,
Bonnie
sweet.
Caulfield.
You're here.
Yeah, Ken Rich is here.
All right.
Debbie Supan and Richard Burrows from the Academy is here.
Okay. All right. Thanks everybody for joining. I don't have a lot of, we had a small agenda that Howard put together before the meeting, before we actually scheduled the meeting. So we'll review that. I don't have a whole lot of questions outside of that. I think the questions that I put down there for the finance manual, it looks like somebody highlighted some things on the packet for this month, which actually answered most of my questions just by highlighting things on the P&L. So that would be very quick and helpful.
Nate, do we need to approve the minutes from last month?
Sure. You tell me. Do we need to?
We usually do.
Okay. Let's do that.
That we should need to add that to the agenda next time.
Are there other things that we should also do?
No, that's the only other thing that I don't see on there.
Okay. Perfect. All right. So that's going to be part of the agenda. Okay. So first of the agenda, I guess, then let's review and approve the minutes from last meeting. I was good with those.
Yeah.
Jeff, you're good with those too.
Yep, no issues.
Okay. So between the two of us, we agree. Now what do we do? How do we do that? I call for a motion here. It's just me and Jeff.
Well, I don't know if we have enough people for a motion.
No, you don't.
Well,
Do you second my?
I'll just, Rich, if you don't mind me jumping in here.
We can just we can add in these
Yeah.
current minutes that there are no questions or just that the minutes were approved. It's fine. Can't really make a motion with two people.
Yeah. Okay. Good.
Well, Rich, I'll just point out one thing. In a finance committee meeting, there are no decisions that are being made. So you really don't take votes.
Okay.
You might keep some records and you might keep records of what you talked about. But because it's not a board meeting, you don't take any official action. So it's just kind of more like a work session.
Okay.
So not as formal as your board meeting.
Thank you. I appreciate
So
it.
do I need to type minutes, you think, Ken?
I would think you would type up what happened, yeah, just as a recording, yes, just so you have record.
Record.
Okay. So that being said, we have a few things we want to talk about. September financials. I did review, because we had two different packets here, one for this meeting and the other is the actual board meeting packet. I've reviewed both. Jeff, have you been able to review I'm going to call it the larger one, the more detailed one? Did you have any questions on that?
Yeah, I had a chance to review it last week and I didn't have any questions. It looked pretty straightforward.
Okay. The only question I had kind of relates to the finance manual. I read this finance manual. Great reading, by the way. And I just had a couple questions and wanted to make sure we were getting all of the funding that we are eligible for. Specifically, there were a couple here that I called out. And it looks like on the file that was sent over, there's several I guess, funds that are highlighted, and a lot of these are actually covered. So whoever highlighted these, thank you. If you did it on purpose or accident, I don't know, but it was very helpful. But a couple of I had were like alternative learning environment. I didn't see that on there. ALE funding, something about $4,700 per student. Do we take part in that? And that's on here? Is it something different?
Most of the charter schools in the state have a waiver from providing an alternative learning environment. It's not required by law that you have that waiver. I mean, you could participate in the program if you want, but you don't. Most charters have a waiver, and they say, you know, we're providing a different learning environment for all students instead of putting a program aside for those students. $4,700 per student sounds pretty good, but I can just tell you from some past experience, we typically had to add money to that to be able to actually fund an alternative learning environment for our students.
Okay.
But that's the reason you don't have any revenue in that area.
Okay.
And is
something
that typically like a suspension school? Is that like a suspension school, alternative learning?
No, a lot of folks might think it's that, but there's like 14 different situations a student might have. And if a student has at least 2 of them, they might qualify. So what I usually think of it would be a student that's behind down on their credits. They need to take some extra courses to catch up to graduate. You'll see that a lot of times. You'll see students that are not living in their home environment. You know, they could have had some other kind of problems themselves. But typically, it's for students that are behind. Occasionally, it could be a discipline situation, but not all the time.
Okay, thank you.
Another question I had was around E-rate, specifically to like phone and internet services. The manual has some program in there. There's like a discount of 20 to 90%, depending on a couple things. Is there a way to know that we are taking part in that? I mean, I looked at the phone internet bill, if you will, and it's high as I would expect it to be, but I didn't know if that was discounted or not, or if there's a way that we know if that is or how it can be.
I think Vic can answer that question for
I
you.
can give you input on that. We, on the services that we are able to use through Cox Internet for campus connectivity, we get a discounted rate. We qualify for a 50% discount, whereas that's our rate level or discount level. So yes, those bills, if you see from Cox, for not phone, but for campus to campus WAN connectivity, you know, network connectivity, we're getting a discounted rate through them. And then other E-rate, you know, tier 2 services like network switching, anything to provide in-network capability to the students. Wireless access points, network switches and such. We take advantage of that also, and we get the 50%. Does that answer your question sufficiently?
Yeah.
And Vic, that 50% comes off the bill before we're actually billed. Is that correct?
Yeah, there's actually 2 ways you can do it depending on, you know, what your data vendor is going to do. You can either pay it fully and get a refund of half, you know, of 50%, or you can pay at a discounted rate. It's all up to the vendor for the service, but for the Cox Communications, we negotiate with them to be, you know, to pay the discounted rate. We don't pay, you know, full and get a refund. We pay the discounted rate. And I think the last time we paid for any type of network infrastructure at the other level of E-rate funding, it's hard for me to tell. John was involved with that, but I could research it if it was important to know. We have awards for this year and some potential to get some network infrastructure. I'm kind of looking at access points, but I've got to circle back with our vendor, CDW, or telecom on that and the E-Rate Central folks.
Then outside of that, I didn't have anything else really, but I did have a question on encumbrances outstanding. I'm assuming that's more of like funds allocated for certain. It's not necessarily spent, but it's allocated for that. Is that what that
Right.
is? Okay.
Right.
Okay.
A lot, the utility bills and things like that, especially, and that's run through the app scanning finance system as a requisition. And once it's approved, then that is encumbered, and that lets you know in certain areas you've already obligated that money. So you don't want to spend over the budget.
Got it. So then in an example, just so I know how to read this going forward, like in custodial on page 13 of the big file that was sent over.
Okay.
You kind of follow on. The budget was 264,000 for the year. This period, or I'm getting for this last month for September, 21,989.
Right.
We have accrual, or we have funds holding of 186,000, the encumbrances. So that's allocated towards that account.
Right.
We spent 65,000.
Mm-hmm.
The available balance is what we would have at the end of the year with the encumbrances and the year to date and this period spent expenditures.
I'm not sure what page you're looking at, but
I
I don't know what you're looking at.
let me share my screen. Let me share my screen.
But the available balance takes into consideration the encumbrance. Yes, share your screen. Yes.
Do you guys see this? Like you
That, yes, absolutely.
So right here it's got all this and goes in order, and it says at the end, I'm guessing available balance is 11,000. That's after year to date encumbrances and current period from
and
budget.
So that gives you a little, cushion if something goes over, or, then you've got that little bit of cushion there.
So when we say available balance, we're assuming at the end of the year.
Yes.
With if it's got encumbrances in there.
Right, but each period expenditure is going to, if you don't have an encumbrance in there, for instance, look at that first line that's not highlighted, your salary, of course.
Yeah.
Right, you don't have any encumbrances, so every month you're going to expect another 35,410, more or less. Except in June, it's going to be double for your instructional, yes.
And then each month, this available balance will go down from there.
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay.
I highlighted that really so you would see the different funds that we do use.
Yeah, yes. That was really helpful. And that answered a lot of my questions of that finance manual. In fact, I'm done with that now. I see that we have that. So I guess I'm curious from y'all's experience and Jeff and I and Mr. Burrows being semi-new, what was your take on September?
I think it was okay. And, bear in mind, you're starting school. So a lot of expenses are going to be, you're going to spend a lot of money at the beginning of school for classroom supplies and things like that. And I think it's looking pretty good. And also as the year goes on, like in October, I've already looked, and once you kind of know, when I budget as if everyone is going to take the insurance. But then I've kind of looked at it now in October after a full month of paying people, and I see that there's going to be some people that aren't going to take insurance. And we kind of talked about having a cushion, and the cushion basically is in your benefits. So that gives you some money when if something does come up. For instance, last year we had to pay for a sound system. When those kind of things come up, you do get a cushion for things like your benefits that are not going to be fully used. So I've already looked and kind of seen that we're not going to use a lot of the benefits that were budgeted, which is good. Which means, something's always going to come up, knock on wood. And I know that we've done a lot of repairs already, especially at the EMS building on their HVAC systems.
Mm-hmm.
And I think some of them are 30 years old maybe or something.
Just put a little bit of money into it. I think a couple of weeks ago. I think there was something.
Yeah, and we have every month, we've been paying some pretty good sized bills to repair those, not replace them, but repair them.
Do we need to, what's that process look like as we start looking at budgeting for next year or the year after? Like what does that process involve if we need to start looking at thinking about budgeting for a new unit like that? Is that a 1 year or 2 year process, or is that we throw an emergency group together and because we need it now, or how does that work?
It just depends, if we, this year we've repaired several, so hopefully the repairs will last for a while.
Yeah.
But then there may be others that haven't been repaired that may go out next year, and it could be, at that point in time, it's just determining it. Are you better off repairing it or replacing it?
Yeah.
And then you just budget accordingly. And,
we look at it, yeah.
We want to hold to that ending budget, but, realistically, if something like that were to come up, if 2 or 3 units come out, then your anticipated budget's going to go down. But another thing, Nate, is you're not likely to spend 100% of, for instance, your federal funds or your categorical funds, like the 2223 you saw, professional development.
Mm-hmm.
Very rarely do you spend 100% of those. We budget them. So you could very well have a balance left over. You're not supposed to have over about a 15% aggregate balance. I think it is, Ken, of those funds. But,
I just think about, as you said, 30-year-old units has there been conversations of eventually we're going to have to replace. You can only duct tape something too much.
Yeah.
Right.
I don't know of any.
At what what time do we as a committee come together for next year's budget and say, what?
Right.
Elementary school does need a new unit. That's going to cost $30,000. And do we need to start thinking about that now? I guess is what I'm trying to get to.
Right. Yeah.
What does that look like,
right. I'd say probably in the spring, once you've gone through the heating system, heating, and then come into the cooling and see how the air conditioning's working. Would you think that would probably be a good time to think about it?
Rich, do you guys have someone that handles your facilities, or does that just fall upon the superintendent administration?
Jack?
Well, it certainly falls on Vic and his maintenance supervision to maintain the facilities as they're currently in state. My sense is that after the first of the year, prior to us preparing for the next year's school budget, we'll need to put together a little task force of folks to say, these things have reached the apex of their existence. We need to start thinking about how to replace those particular units, and that will guide us in making our budgetary decisions. So I think sometime, as Bonnie says, after we've used up all the heat, and before we start putting all the cold in the buildings, we should figure out what it is that we need to repair. And it may be that nothing is at that point for even the next school year, and that it's cheaper for us to just continue to, as Nate says, duct tape it together until it's time to figure out what we need to do. So,
but you get from the south central part of the country, it's duct tape everything together, duct tape ingenuity.
It's a wonder pill.
One thing that we do have is we have a contract with Comfort Systems, and they maintain our units, and they let us know if something's going to fail.
Okay.
So, and we just replaced the HVAC in the library, and it was, I think, $8,900 because they're smaller individual units rather than a large, what you'd consider a commercial unit.
Yeah, that makes sense, and I appreciate that. And I think Richard, you did a really good job answering that too. I think when you guys get together from a leadership perspective and start thinking about our wish list for next year, that would be a good time, I guess, to bring that up. And that was really what I was after is, at what point do we need to, because we don't want to be surprised by, I don't know how much they are, $10, $15, $20, $30,000 surprise when we know it's coming. We should probably $100,000, Jeff. I don't know how much.
They're more than that. We're talking about AC units for buildings of this size. They can be several $100,000.
Yeah. So I mean, we know that they're old. I would be remiss not to bring it up and at least keep that in the back of our minds that we start thinking about if we do start getting, looking at a potential new building. If we do that for the elementary, or we're going to do different things. that thing's on its last legs, whatever that looks like, right? So
Even though you have some issues, it sounds like, in the previous school year, you guys spent $98 per student on electricity, and the statewide average was $118.
wow.
So for charter schools,
Yeah.
just comparing charter schools. So you're still on below the state average for what most charter schools are having to pay for electricity, even with some issues. So sounds like if you guys take a look at it and evaluate those units and make some decisions on when you can replace them, you're on the right track.
I think it might be Debbie making sure the lights are turned off in the administration building. Is that what's going on with that?
No, it's those
Light
motion activated lights in the.
The motion
commons.
activated.
That's what it is.
That's funny.
The trade-off is we have to stand up and wave our arms every once in a while in a board meeting.
I'm actually here. I feel good. I guess just from Bonnie and Ken, are there things that you identified that we as a leadership group, as a board, should discuss from the last month, or what are y'all's thoughts, and what can we focus on this next month for Richard and team?
I think one of the things that we want to do is, do a full transition with Rich to get to having meetings with him each month, also to make sure he's more in tune with the Arkansas financial model, and it's not that much different than other states, but there are some differences, and that he understands what's going on there, and then that he's taken the bigger role on the finances. Bonnie and I are always here to support and offer up to you guys whatever you need and answer questions. Use our software to allow you to analyze a lot of your financial situation. Work with Rich on that, because I haven't had a chance to do that at all yet. It's just we've been busy. School's been getting started. We have a conference tomorrow. Once we get that conference out of the way, for us, it's going to slow down a little bit. So that's kind of our plan.
And I also wanted to say that Rich has implemented this pre-authorization format now for purchases over $500. And Rich, I think that's a really good idea. Before it is ever approved as a purchase order, if he has any questions, he gets that information from the principals, and if he approves it and I look at the budget then and say it's okay, the principals have approved it. I think that's a really good system, Rich, and I commend you for doing that.
Well, thanks. I thought it was really important, both from site-based considerations and from the district office, that there were more eyes on all the information before it was finally approved. And in this particular case, it was, if it comes from a school, let's say it's a teacher who's making a request, it goes to the administrator or the principal of the school site so that I know they've looked at it before it's come to me. My approval is based upon understanding where the money is going. And Bonnie's job is to make sure we have the money in place to actually make the expenditure. It means for those folks who are actually producing the purchase orders or the requisitions themselves, they know that everybody has said yes, no, or needs more information. So it's a great learning tool for me as well. So,
and for instance, there was one today. I don't know if you saw your email, but I had some questions on it. It looked like it was going to pay for some software out of operating, and I think we found where $7,000 of it can come, and maybe a couple more, which is a federal fund instead of operating. And hopefully the balance can come from another federal fund. We're looking into that.
There's a collective accountability here and no surprises.
Right.
Yeah.
Good.
Yeah. Good deal.
So is that a change of procedure, written policy procedure, or is that just what you guys are doing?
It's just what we're doing.
Okay.
I'm catching it not as another layer of expectation, but more about all of us understanding where we are at this point, and I really do consider it a great assistance to me just to see where the money is going.
I think it's great.
Yeah.
It falls in line with what we consider best practice. Absolutely. Yeah. Our best schools in the state are using variations of that. But the bottom line is we have multiple eyes upon it, and we make sure it's in the budget first before it's approved.
Yeah. And that way you know that when the money has been put forward, it's good to go. There's no questions on the school end about whether or not it's going to happen or not.
Very good. I like the accountability.
Right.
It looks like the next piece of the budget, or sorry, next piece of the meeting. I think you guys actually did this. There was a question if we could report by campus budget versus actual, and I think you did that. I'm just this
Right.
big
That's the
59 page.
information
Yeah,
that Debbie sent you guys with
Yeah.
this agenda, I think.
yeah. So
Y'all
that's what I
like
was
the
looking
way
at.
that
actually.
looks?
Yeah. So year to date versus budget. So is that budget
Well
year to date?
balanced.
That would be budget. That'd be budget year to date. Okay.
Yes.
I was the one who had proposed this particular discussion. Let me just sort of give my background on this. I had a couple of meetings with principals, whereupon I was asking them, could you produce for me the budget for your school site? And they said as nicely as possible that they just had never had that. They've been asking for it for about 3 or 4 years. And so if you don't know exactly as an administrator what funds are available for you to advance the goals and objectives of your school site, then I think you're at a disadvantage. And also from my point of view, the elementary and the high schools function very differently and have very different needs. So the effort in this particular case is to understand what is unique about the individual school sites and what is regularized between elementary and secondary. At the same time, and I think this is where Bonnie and I will still do some fine tuning on this because it's still a work in progress, is to understand that these are expenses that can be identified for the elementary school. Here are the expenses that can be identified for the high school. Here are the expenses that the district office funds on behalf of both sites and for the institution on the whole. And in this way, I think we might be able to say, if there are 46 teachers at an individual school site, then the professional development funds are proportionally distributed to elementary or to secondary, not as a district-wide amount, but this is the amount of money you have to work the professional development for your individual teachers, which means that when those requests come to me, I can see that, oh, I see, there's $48,000 available to you. And in your professional development plan, you're putting these particular efforts forward as part of expenses. And then if the district office decides that there's something to do for everyone, we also know what is available for us to do in terms of professional development K through 12. So I think it's really a very simple format. I don't know that we're trying to track expenses as much as know how much money is available to do the work and the goals and objectives of the school site. So I don't want this to be extra work for anyone, but really I'd like it to be simple work so that we can see exactly what it is that we're attempting to do.
Could I ask a question as far as the school board packet, those reports that we have been using in the past? Nate, Jeff, you're probably not even familiar. Well, it's those first packets you get for the board meeting.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if something that comes directly out of eFinance, like these reports that you were talking about, Nate, that were highlighted, and then these individual by school and district expenditure status reports are more helpful. The only difference I can see in some of the ones that they have been using in the past, besides some of them having to require manual entry in the first place, these come directly out of the system, is that they show a projection. The expenditure status report already has your projection for the year in it. So, I mean, y'all, if you want to keep doing all the above plus these additional ones, we can certainly do that. I know that's a lot for you all to go through too. So just what y'all might want to talk. Yes.
I was just going to interject here that I think that the board is really, and I don't want to speak for the board, but I think that a K-12 report is the kinds that are already being produced for the purposes of the board review is entirely appropriate to maintain as part of that work. The purposes of having a breakout for elementary and secondary are really about mid-management efforts to see what the effort looks like, as opposed to what the total budget for the district looks like. So this is really a matter of tearing apart the budget for use by the principals and me, and then letting that work continue in the way that it normally would. But the reports for the board should be comprehensive and project across a variety of columns.
Okay.
But Nate, Jeff, would that still be something that you would prefer to see at the board, would be the comprehensive reports?
I think for the board, yes. I think for the finance committee, I don't know, Jeff, how you feel about it. I like the detail just so I can understand more and be able to speak. I wouldn't say intelligently, but more intelligently about what's being said, and kind of and help guide and direct the board as we go through if they have any of those questions. Jeff, I don't know how you feel about that. I personally don't mind it. But to your point, I don't think the whole board would want to digest all of that. We just want to have that summary overview, which is good, which is great.
Yeah.
But for
And
the
I
finance
agree.
purpose,
I think Nate and I are a little bit odd in that we're both numbers dorks. And so, for us, what you get in a board meeting is you can pick it up, you can glance at it while people are talking, and you can get a quick snapshot feeling for what's going on inside the district. The finance committee it strikes me as something where we need to be a little more granular. And so for that reason, I like the format that we got. It's able to appropriately dive into the weeds and be able to just give us the opportunity to ask certain questions.
Yeah. Well, and I would say too that I finished a 2-hour meeting with principals, and as we were talking about professional development as an example, they said it would be so much easier for them to know what they were working with than it would be to lob the request out into the great purchase order universe and hope that there was enough money to be able to cover their expectation. I came back with a very strong proposal that as we look into next year's efforts, I will need professional development plans from them that set out their expectations for the entire year. So we're not saying, oh, look, this particular opportunity is suddenly available. Do we have $10,000 to spend on it? Maybe it's not the best thing to spend $10,000 on, but rather to look at what our goals and objectives are and put a plan forward. It's always easier to change what you know than it is to just guess at what is coming next.
Right. And within, say, for instance, professional development, you might say split it down the middle or percentage wise, one school might need it more than the other, but
Right.
then one school might have a professional development that's going to be 5,000, and the other school might want a professional development that's 500. So those numbers can be adjusted for school.
So I think the threshold will be percentages of staff at those schools, and then an ongoing discussion about what can the district provide
Right.
and what does an individual teacher need.
Right. And that budget can be adjusted accordingly.
That's correct.
If you have 50,000, then if you need to switch 10,000 from one location to the other, you can also do that in the budget. So,
Yeah.
You said something very important there, Rich, just from my past experience, and that is a lot of the best professional development doesn't cost anything because you're doing it amongst your own folks, or you're working together a lot of times on a path that you want to take the school down, and you're not bringing in some outside voice that takes you, no telling where. There is the time to spend money on the outside, but I know the 60 hours of professional development our teachers received each year, 42 of those were local hours. We let them go outside for some of the hours, but we had the direction and we had the PD on campus. Now, some of that was purchased, some of it was not, but professional development is a good example of an area that you said it just right. You make that plan early up front.
That's right. Yeah. So there are individual needs for teachers, especially if you're a new teacher. There are initiative needs for teachers, meaning we're taking on this particular project and those resources are only available outside the district. But I agree with Ken. Most of the good work that happens in school districts is because of the good work and the good knowledge of the people who are already there doing that work. So collaborative time is really critical. So thank you, Ken. That's really good.
I had one more question, actually. I just remembered. What is the mandated $500 deal again? I remember y'all talking about that. What is that?
Ken?
It is state requirement in elementary schools that teachers be given $500 for materials and supplies. There was this big, I don't know, I call it, everybody thinks teachers spend money out of their pocket all the time, and some do and some don't. But the legislature a few years ago mandated that you give each teacher up to $500 to spend for materials and supplies. Now you can take out, I think we did, some money up front. I think we only have $400 showing because you can take off like $100 off the top for like paper that everybody uses.
Lamination.
Oh, okay.
Like laminator, that kind of thing. But the one thing I did notice that surprised me a little bit is a lot of the teachers have not spending that money at this point. And when I go look at most districts, typically what you'll see, charters or traditional schools, that $500 will be spent in the summer as they get ready, to start the school year with those materials and supplies. And every school has a different setup on how they allow those teachers to purchase. It may be you have to purchase through catalog orders through the school and make your orders through the central office or through the high school office or elementary office or wherever. Others allow them to go out and make purchases at individual places and turn in receipts. I don't know what your guys' local policy is on that. Basically, they have $400 to spend on materials and supplies as they see fit, only in the elementary school.
And I noticed last school year, there were several teachers that did not take advantage of that. And that's not something that carries over from year to year. It starts back over the next year. So if they want to use it, they have it available. They don't always take advantage of it for whatever reason. I don't know. And last year was a strange year. It might have had something to do with it since we didn't have class for the last 3.5, 4 months.
And we certainly don't know yet, Bonnie, whether or not virtual instruction will change our sense of what needs are in terms of supplies as well, since students are not in school during that particular time.
That's right.
Is it supplies they can take home? Is it even usable at home? But this goes back again to my professional development plan piece that the conversation with principals and with assistant principals is, what is it that we need to be spending money on? Because I'm gonna speak outside my experience, but only in my opinion, is that I have probably already seen Mrs. Zupan process reimbursements, process credit cards, process or attempt to process no receipts, any variety of things that teachers who are busy doing their job don't see that as an important aspect of their responsibility. So what we need to do is get them to understand that the supplies that teachers are using are to help them be successful in the entire plan for their students at their particular grade level. And so if we need to give them templates of opportunities, so it's not them struggling to figure out what to spend it on, then we can say, of this list of things that you could spend, here are the places that you could go. And so, Debbie, would you say that that's an accurate description of supplies and receipts and other?
Very much so.
Very much, yeah. So it's a little scattershot right now, and I think we could help them be more consistent.
Right. And Debbie has my empathy and my sympathy working on the credit card bill. It's every place I've ever dealt with or worked. It's the same thing with the credit card.
Yeah.
Well, I'll give you a different idea here, and it's Bonnie. This is a little bit different. And what the district I worked in, the requirement was all orders had to be ready to be placed on July 1 for those $500. So they had to have those orders in place, have all the paperwork filled out for the secretaries to make those orders on July 1. And that money was spent and invoiced directly to the district. We didn't have all this one-off credit card thing or reimbursement for each teacher. Unless they had a special request. Every once in a while, I'd let them do a special request, but typically they can buy whatever they want through online orders made during the summer.
I think that'd be a great plan.
I like that one.
That's called
Well, so did our bookkeeper, I promise you.
Yeah, we call that one-stop shopping.
That's correct. Now they had a choice about 5 different places to buy supplies from.
Yeah.
There's a lot of educational supply companies out there.
It's a daunting task. When I worked at Los Angeles Unified School District and we had 43,000 teachers who were trying to spend X amount of dollars in support of their arts programs, they said, I don't know what to get. And so what we did is created a booklet for them of the best things to support the educational plan in place. And with that in hand, they actually were able to spend their money rather quickly. So I think we might be able to put that together on behalf of grade level teams. So the teachers come together, say what it is they need at a grade level, and then collectively they can work out those expenditures.
And the one other thing to think about there, Rich, just from my past experience would be, $500 is mandated for elementary, but there is no mandate for high school.
That's right.
So how do you treat high school staff? So you need to have an idea how you're going to handle that.
Well, that is true. And so we talked about that actually today in terms of funding. And a great deal of the things that go on at the high school level are funded through grants. So I would get requests for teacher expenditures at $900, which is of course above the $500 approval threshold. And I said, so where is this money coming from? Oh, that's coming from a grant. So we need to work carefully to sort of distribute all of those efforts at the high school as well. Yeah. And that's because I think as I look at the budget, or at least as principals perceive their budget, they don't look at an individual dance teacher as having a need. They look at the dance department as having needs of which the teachers collectively decide what is the best plan or approach. So those are more departmental choices, and I'm going to encourage teachers to come together to make those selections.
Okay. That was really it. Jeff?
Nothing else for me.
You good? Okay. Bonnie, Ken, Richie?
Well, I'm going to this is just Bonnie and I chuckling together. All right, Bonnie, let's laugh here. One of the transitions between CEOs and superintendents is updating all of the passwords and login connections for all of the revenue sources that have to do with what comes to us that's owed to us by the state and the federal government. And I thought those would be really simple things to do. Well, changing a name is pretty hard when it comes to the hardwire of federal agencies. We have had a variety of institutional names over the 20 years, everything from the Benton County School of the Arts to the Arkansas Arts Academy Foundation to the Arkansas Arts Academy. So in the process of doing that, I think we have successfully moved through a dozen updates with state and federal agencies so that our funding can come in. The one that we are struggling with, and we are now into our over 2 weeks effort, is to update SAM.gov, which is the award management system for federal funds that come to the state and then to us. And we've tried 3 times with Duns and Bradstreet to get them to correct the information, which is the information used by SAM.gov to update our entity registration so we can get our money. And as Bonnie and I know, we didn't get the money this last month. And I quickly had our staff call Bonnie and say, do we have enough money to get us October? And I think your answer was positive. Thank you.
Yes.
But we're still trying to get the SAM.gov updates. And they've been in there for so long, they must be etched in stone because they can't seem to update them. And we even sent in updates as early as 9 a.m. today.
Like you sent in articles of incorporation and all sorts of things. SAM.gov is not user friendly, even if you haven't changed your entity's name, I promise you. But so this is just making it even harder and more time consuming.
Probably the most difficult thing I've ever participated in. And I have participated in a few difficult things. So I'm letting you know as a finance committee that I am determined to make sure that we get our money for next month, and that when they give us our money for next month, we get this month's money as well.
Right.
So it's not like you lose the money. It's just we're trying to catch up at this particular.
Right.
Yeah.
Ken, did you have something on that?
No. Just be persistent and I would just keep calling. I know there's a lot of it you do online. If I could talk to someone, I'd prefer to do that.
Well, and they have wonderful help desks, but there's multiple portions of the agency that are involved in updating. And I can't tell you how many things still come to me. I'm just going to become Mary Lay. That's just it. Because, you know, and sometimes I just answer as if I'm Mary because it's easier.
For Nate and Jeff,
Victor, Victoria.
that site, it's more for people that make purchases with federal dollars to check to see if they've been debarred by the government from doing business with the federal government. That's basically what the whole thing's for. But for school districts to get our funds, we just have to be listed on there. It's just simple as that. It's nothing, it's nothing, shouldn't be a big deal, but it is, unfortunately.
Yeah, our first Duns and Bradstreet update changed it from Arkansas Arts Academy Foundation to Arkansas Arts Academy. And we sent them all the documents that showed that. And so they just left it like it was before, which is the one thing that keeps stumbling us to be able to move forward. So I have a little dartboard. It says sam.gov on it, and I throw a little dart at it every day just to see if we're going to make it. But that's the only challenge we've had at this particular point. And I want to say, this is my big shout out to Victor Craig, who in the very first day that I was here, walked me through all of those necessary updates for federal and state dollar login.
Awesome. Awesome. Mm-hmm. Good job.
Okay, that's all I have.
Okay. Anybody else? That's all I had. I'm good. I appreciate the time.
Oh, thank you.
Thanks,
Thank
guys.
you so much.
So
I have one piece of information. The federal government has decided to fund free lunches for the remaining part of the year. So that'll be
Like through 2021.
correct, June 21.
Wow.
So that'll generate some
Fantastic.
more funds for our child nutrition unit.
How is that going?
It's
For
a
you?
nightmare.
Okay.
Right
Like
now,
what?
I'm cleaning up the beginning, and I'm going to share a little bit about this tomorrow night. But
Okay.
because they decided to give free lunches retroactively, I'm having to go into each student's account and credit back their charges. But when it's done, it's done.
Okay. Well, it's a good thing either way.
Right, right.
It will be good.
Okay. All right, y'all. Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
We'll talk to you, Richie, and Debbie will talk to you guys tomorrow.
That's
Yep,
right.
you bet.
All
All right. Y'all have a good